The dust-choked streets of Hecla, Montana Territory, had seen many strange sights in 1878, but none quite like Clara Pennington standing in her doorway at 6 feet and 3 inches tall, watching the men of the town scatter like nervous rabbits whenever she approached. Clara had been widowed for 8 months now, ever since Thomas Pennington's horse threw him during a cattle drive and broke his neck on the hard Montana ground. She had loved Thomas well enough, though their marriage had been more practical than passionate. He was the only man in 3 counties who would court a woman who towered over him by half a foot, and she had been grateful for that much. Now, at 24 years old, she found herself alone in a town where the men could barely meet her eyes without their necks cramping from looking up. The general store needed restocking. Clara pulled on her shawl despite the late summer heat and stepped out into the afternoon sun. Her skirts whispered against the wooden planks of the boardwalk as she made her way down Main Street, acutely aware of how the other women watched her with a mixture of pity and relief. Relief, she thought bitterly, that their own daughters were of a more manageable size. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Pennington," said Margaret Thornton, barely reaching Clara's shoulder even with her elaborate hat. "Good afternoon, Margaret." Clara kept her voice gentle and her smile pleasant, though she wanted to scream sometimes at the way everyone treated her like a curiosity. Inside Miller's general store, Herbert Miller stood on a stepladder reaching for a tin of peaches on the top shelf. He was a short, round man who had made it clear through his wife that he found Clara's height unseemly. "Should have been a man with that frame," he had reportedly said. "What a waste." Clara browsed the bolts of fabric, running her fingers over a particularly lovely blue calico that reminded her of summer skies. She would need new curtains before winter came howling down from the mountains. "Mrs. Pennington," Herbert said from behind his counter, his tone professional but cool. "What can I help you with today? 3 yards of this blue calico, please. And I need flour, sugar, coffee, and beans. Also, do you have any of that good soap left?" The lavender one, Herbert began measuring the fabric with practiced efficiency. "The lavender soap is 50 cents now." Price went up. Clara knew very well it had been 30 cents last week, but she did not argue. She simply nodded and waited while Herbert gathered her supplies, his movements brisk and impersonal. When she counted out her money, his fingers never touched hers as he scooped the coins from the counter. Outside, she struggled with her parcels, trying to balance them all while maintaining some shred of dignity. A gust of wind caught her skirts and nearly toppled the precariously stacked packages. "Let me help you with that." The voice was quiet, deep, and came from somewhere around her own eye level. Clara turned, startled, and found herself looking almost directly into a pair of steady gray eyes. The man was tall, perhaps 6'4", with broad shoulders and the weathered face of someone who spent his days under the sun. He wore dusty trail clothes and a hat that had seen better days, but there was something gentle in his expression that made Clara's breath catch. "I can manage," she said automatically, because that was what she always said. "I know you can," the man replied, his voice soft as wind through grass, "but you do not have to." Before she could protest further, he had gathered most of her parcels into his long arms. "Where are you headed?" "The boarding house, Mrs. Fletcher's place at the end of Oak Street." Clara felt heat rising in her cheeks. "I appreciate this, Mr. Vincent Barlowe," he said. "Just got into town this morning. I am looking for work as a ranch hand." They walked together through the dusty streets, and for the first time in Clara's adult life, she did not feel like a giantess lumbering through a world built too small. Vincent Barlowe matched her stride easily, his long legs covering the ground with an unhurried grace. "You are new to Hecla, then?" Clara asked, hyper-aware of the stares they were drawing. Two tall people walking together was apparently as fascinating as a traveling circus to the good people of this town. Yes, madam, came up from Wyoming. Heard there might be work at some of the bigger spreads around here. The Jacobson Ranch is always hiring. They have the biggest operation in the county. Mr. Jacobson is fair, pays on time. Vincent nodded, filing away the information. And you, have you lived here long? 3 years. My husband and I came here from Ohio. He thought Montana Territory would be a fresh start. She paused, then added quietly, he died last December. Horse accident. I am sorry for your loss. Vincent's voice held genuine sympathy without the cloying pity Clara had grown to detest. They reached Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house, a tidy 2-story structure with a front porch that Clara had helped paint last spring. Vincent set the parcels down gently near the door. Thank you, Mr. Barlowe. That was very kind of you. Vincent, please. He tipped his hat, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara saw a man look at her without having to tilt his head back. It was my pleasure, Mrs. Pennington. Clara, she heard herself say. You can call me Clara. Something warm flickered in his gray eyes. Clara, he repeated, as if testing how her name felt in his mouth. Then he tipped his hat again and walked away, his long shadow stretching across the dusty street. Clara carried her parcels inside, her heart doing strange things in her chest. Over the next few weeks, Clara found herself thinking about Vincent Barlowe far more than was proper for a recently widowed woman. She learned from town gossip that he had indeed found work at the Jacobson Ranch, that he was quiet and kept to himself, that he was unmarried and somewhere around 27 years old. She learned that he came into town every Saturday for supplies and always tipped his hat politely to everyone he passed. She did not see him again until the church social in mid-September. The entire town gathered for the harvest celebration, with tables laden with food and fiddle music drifting through the evening air. Clara had brought her famous apple pies, though she stood apart from the dancing, watching the couples twirl and spin. Those pies look mighty good. She turned to find Vincent beside her, cleaned up and wearing what was obviously his best shirt. He still had dust on his boots, but his hair was neatly combed and his jaw freshly shaven. Would you like a slice? Clara asked, pleased that her voice came out steady. I would, thank you. He accepted the plate she prepared for him and took a bite, his eyes closing briefly in appreciation. This is delicious. You are a fine baker, Clara. My mother's recipe. She always said the secret was using enough cinnamon and not skimping on the butter. They stood together in companionable silence, watching the dancers. Clara tried not to notice how many women were watching Vincent, how Margaret Thornton's daughters kept glancing his way and whispering to each other. You dance? Vincent asked suddenly. Clara felt her stomach drop. I used to. But it has been a long time. My husband was not much for dancing. Would you like to? Vincent set down his empty plate and held out his hand. Dance with me, I mean. Clara stared at his outstretched hand as if it were a snake. People will talk. People always talk. His gray eyes were steady on hers. Let them. She placed her hand in his, and he led her to where the other couples were dancing. The fiddle player struck up a waltz, and Vincent's hand settled at her waist as naturally as breathing. He was tall enough that she did not have to stoop or bend, tall enough that when she looked ahead, she saw his shoulder rather than the top of his head. You fit just right, Vincent said quietly, his breath warm near her ear. Clara felt tears prick her eyes at those simple words. You fit just right. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. She had always been too tall, too ungainly, too much. But in Vincent's arms, moving to the music under the Montana stars, she felt exactly the right size for the first time in her life. They danced 3 dances together before propriety demanded they stop. The town was already buzzing with speculation, and Clara knew there would be talk tomorrow. But she found she did not care as much as she should have. "Thank you for the dances," Vincent said as he walked her back to her boarding house later that evening. The moon hung huge and silver over the mountains, painting everything in shades of gray and white. "Thank you for asking me." Clara hesitated on the porch steps, which put them almost exactly at eye level. "Vincent, I should tell you that this town talks. If you are seen with me too often, people will make assumptions. Let them assume." He said it so simply, as if it were the easiest thing in the world. "You do not understand. I am widowed, yes, but it has not been a year. And I am not exactly what most men want in a wife. I am too tall, too plain, and my late husband's debts mean I have very little to offer anyone." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, his face serious in the moonlight. "May I speak plainly, Clara? Please do. I have been alone for a long time. I have worked ranches from Texas to Montana, never staying anywhere long because I never found a reason to. But from the moment I saw you struggling with those parcels outside Miller's store, trying so hard to prove you did not need help even though you clearly did, I felt something shift inside me." He took off his hat, turning it in his hands. "I am not a rich man. I am not educated or refined. But I am honest, and I work hard, and I would be honored if you would allow me to court you properly." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. "The town will say it is too soon. They will say I am disrespecting Thomas's memory. What do you say?" She thought about Thomas, who had been kind but distant, who had married her out of practicality rather than passion. She thought about the lonely months since his death, the pitying looks, the whispers. She thought about how it felt to dance with someone who made her feel graceful instead of awkward. "I say yes," she whispered. "I would like that very much." Vincent's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Then I will call on you next Sunday if that suits you." "That suits me fine." He tipped his hat one more time and walked away into the darkness, leaving Clara standing on the porch with her heart full of something that felt dangerously close to hope. True to his word, Vincent appeared at Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house the following Sunday afternoon, scrubbed clean and carrying a bouquet of late-blooming wildflowers. Mrs. Fletcher, a practical widow herself, gave Clara an approving nod before leaving them alone in the parlor with the door decorously open. "I thought we might take a walk," Vincent suggested, "if you are amenable." They walked through the outskirts of Hecla, following a path that led up into the foothills. The aspens were turning gold and the air smelled of pine and coming autumn. Vincent talked about his life, painting pictures with his quiet words of a childhood in Missouri. Parents lost to cholera when he was 15, years of drifting and working wherever he could find employment. "I always thought I would settle down eventually," he said as they paused beside a creek running clear and cold from the mountains. "Find a place that felt like home, but nowhere ever did until I came here." "What makes Hecla different?" Clara asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Vincent turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious and warm at the same time. "You," he said simply, "you make it different." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she did not look away. "Vincent, I need you to understand something. I cared for Thomas, but I did not love him the way a wife should love a husband. He was good to me, and I was grateful, but it was never a great passion. I do not want that kind of marriage again. If we are going to do this, I need it to be real. I would not want it any other way." Vincent reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and strong around hers. "Clara, I have been alone long enough to know what I want. I want someone to build a life with, someone to talk to at the end of the day, someone who fits, and you fit." There was that word again. Fit. As if she were a piece of a puzzle rather than an awkward aberration. "I want that too," she admitted. But people will talk. They already are. Do you care what they say? Clara thought about it honestly. I care less than I expected to, but I live in this town, Vincent. I have to face these people every day. Then we will face them together. Over the following months, Vincent courted Clara with a steady determination that won over even some of the town's harshest critics. He called on her every Sunday, sat with her at church, walked with her through town with his head held high despite the whispers. He brought her small gifts, things that showed he paid attention. A book of poetry because she had mentioned loving to read, a fine cooking pot because hers was wearing thin, a warm shawl in a blue that matched her eyes. In November, he took her to meet the Jacobsons. Samuel Jacobson was a gruff, practical man who had built his ranch from nothing, and his wife Mary was a shrewd woman who missed nothing. They invited Clara and Vincent for Sunday dinner, and Clara was terrified the entire ride out to the ranch in Vincent's borrowed wagon. They will not like me, she fretted, smoothing her skirts for the 100th time. They will love you, Vincent said calmly. And if they do not, it changes nothing between us. But Mary Jacobson took one look at Clara and smiled. My goodness, it is nice to finally meet someone who can reach the top shelves without a stool. Come in, dear. Vincent has told us so much about you. The dinner was warm and welcoming, and Clara found herself relaxing as the evening went on. Samuel talked about the ranch, about his plans to expand the herd in the spring, and then he turned to Vincent. You are a good worker, Barlowe. One of the best hands I have ever had. I would like to make you foreman come January if you are interested. Vincent glanced at Clara before answering. That is a generous offer, sir. Can I have a few days to think about it, of course. But do not think too long. I need to know if I should be looking elsewhere. On the ride back to town, Clara asked, Why did you not accept immediately? That is a wonderful opportunity. Vincent was quiet for a moment, the reins easy in his hands. Because being foreman would mean more responsibility, longer hours. It would mean I could afford to support a wife properly, but it would also mean less time to spend with her. I want to make sure that is what you want. Clara stared at him. What I want, Clara, I am courting you with the intention of asking you to marry me. I think you know that by now, but I will not make decisions about our future without consulting you first. The wagon rattled over the rutted road, and Clara felt something warm and precious unfurl in her chest. Thomas had made every decision without her input, assuming she would simply go along with whatever he decided. The idea that Vincent wanted her opinion, valued her thoughts, was almost overwhelming. I think you should accept, she said finally. But Vincent, I need to know something first. Are you certain about this? About me? Because once the town knows we are serious, there will be no going back. You will be tied to the too-tall widow forever. Vincent pulled the wagon to a stop right there in the middle of the road. He turned to face her fully, his expression fierce in a way she had never seen before. Clara Pennington, you listen to me. You are not too tall. You are not too anything. You are exactly right, exactly perfect, exactly what I have been looking for my whole life without knowing it. And I do not give a damn what this town or any other town thinks about it. I love you. I have loved you since you tried to carry all those parcels by yourself, rather than admit you needed help. I love your strength and your pride, and the way you move through the world like you are apologizing for existing when you should be taking up all the space you need. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. You love me. I love you, he repeated firmly. And I would be the luckiest man in Montana territory if you would agree to marry me. I have debts, she whispered. Thomas left debts, the boarding house rent, money owed to the general store. I have been working them off doing laundry and mending, but it will take months still. I have savings. We will pay them off together. I cannot give you much of a dowry. I do not want your dowry, I want you. Clara laughed through her tears. I am crying like a fool. Is that a yes? Yes, she said, and then louder. Yes, Vincent Barlowe, I will marry you. He kissed her then, right there in the stopped wagon under the huge Montana sky, and Clara felt like she was finally home. The engagement announcement caused exactly the stir Clara had predicted. It had only been 11 months since Thomas's death, and the town's moral guardians were vocal in their disapproval. Clara endured whispered comments at church and pointedly turned backs at the general store, but she also found unexpected allies. Mary Jacobson came to call one afternoon, sweeping into Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house like a force of nature. I heard what Margaret Thornton said about you at the quilting circle, Mary announced without preamble. I want you to know that woman is a bitter old hen, and you should pay her no mind. Clara looked up from her mending. She said I was disgracing Thomas's memory by remarrying so quickly. Thomas Pennington was a good enough man, but he did not appreciate what he had in you. Anyone with eyes could see that. Vincent Barlowe, on the other hand, looks at you like you hung the moon. Do not let small-minded gossips ruin that. It is hard, Clara admitted. Harder than I thought it would be. Of course it is hard, but the best things usually are. Mary sat down across from Clara, her expression softening. I married Samuel when I was 18 years old against my family's wishes. They said he was too poor, too rough, that I was throwing my life away. But I loved him, and I knew he loved me, and that was enough. We built something good together, Clara. You and Vincent can do the same. The unexpected friendship with Mary Jacobson made the coming weeks more bearable. Clara threw herself into preparing for the wedding, which they planned for early December. It would be a simple affair, just the ceremony at the church and a small dinner afterward. Vincent spent his evenings building furniture for the small house they would rent at the edge of town. It was nothing fancy, just 4 rooms and a good well, but it would be theirs. He crafted a sturdy table and chairs, a bed frame from smooth pine, shelves for Clara's few books. I want you to have a real home, he told her one evening as she watched him work in the fading light. Not just a place to sleep, but a home. Clara ran her hand over the smooth wood of the table he had just finished. I never had that before. Even with Thomas, it always felt temporary somehow. Vincent set down his tools and pulled her into his arms. She still marveled at how she fit against him, how her head rested perfectly on his shoulder. Nothing temporary about this, he said into her hair. You are stuck with me now, Clara Pennington. Soon to be Clara Barlowe, she corrected, and felt him smile against her temple. The wedding took place on a bright, cold December morning. The church was half empty because many townspeople chose to show their disapproval through absence, but Clara found she did not care. Mary and Samuel Jacobson were there, along with Mrs. Fletcher and a handful of others who had become genuine friends. Clara wore a simple dress of dove gray silk, the best she could afford, with her mother's cameo at her throat. Vincent wore a new suit that Samuel had insisted on buying him as a wedding gift. And when Clara walked down the short aisle to meet him, the look on his face made her forget everyone and everything else. Reverend Thomas performed the ceremony, his voice solemn as he spoke about love and commitment. When Vincent said his vows, his voice was steady and sure. I, Vincent Barlowe, take you, Clara Pennington, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, to honor you, to stand beside you through whatever comes. I promise to build a life with you, a real life, full of all the things we both deserve. Clara's voice shook as she made her own vows, but her eyes never left Vincent's face. I, Clara Pennington, take you, Vincent Barlowe, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you truly, to be your partner, to build a home with you that is filled with warmth and laughter. I promise to be brave enough to take up space beside you." When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her with such tenderness that Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. The dinner afterward at the Jacobson Ranch was small but joyful. Mary had outdone herself with the food, and Samuel made a toast that brought laughter and more tears. "To Vincent and Clara," he said, raising his glass. "May they have many years of happiness, many children to fill that new house, and may they never stop looking at each other the way they do right now." Vincent's hand found Clara's under the table and squeezed gently. She squeezed back, unable to stop smiling. Their wedding night was gentle and sweet, filled with whispered words and tender touches. Vincent was patient with Clara's nervousness, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished and safe. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed Vincent had built, and Clara felt a peace she had never known before. "Are you happy?" Vincent asked, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. "Happier than I knew I could be," Clara replied honestly. "Are you?" "Yes." He kissed her forehead. "You fit just right, Clara Barlowe. In my arms, in my life, in my heart. Just right." The first months of marriage brought their share of adjustments. Clara learned that Vincent snored softly when he slept on his back, and that he liked his coffee strong and his bacon crispy. Vincent learned that Clara sang quietly to herself while she cooked, and that she needed time alone with her books in the evenings. They learned to navigate sharing space, sharing decisions, sharing a life. Vincent's promotion to foreman came through in January, as Samuel had promised. The extra money meant they could pay off the last of Thomas's debts by February, which lifted a weight from Clara's shoulders she had not realized she was carrying. "We are free and clear," she told Vincent one evening, waving the receipt from the general store that marked the final payment. "No more debts." Vincent swept her up in his arms, spinning her around their small kitchen until she laughed and begged him to stop before he knocked over the stew pot. "We should celebrate," he declared. "How?" He set her down gently, his eyes bright with mischief. "We should start planning our future. A real future, not just getting by." They spent that evening at their kitchen table, making plans and dreaming out loud. Vincent wanted to save money to eventually buy their own small ranch. Clara wanted children, a house full of them to fill the spaces her own lonely childhood had left empty. "How many children?" Vincent asked, grinning. "At least 4, Clara said. "Maybe more." "4 sounds perfect. We can teach them to ride and read and be good people." "They will probably all be tall," Clara warned. "Are you prepared for that?" Vincent reached across the table and took her hands. "I am prepared for anything as long as I have you." Spring came to Montana with wildflowers and warm winds, and with it came news that made Clara's heart race with joy and terror in equal measure. She was pregnant, just 3 months after the wedding. "Are you certain?" Vincent asked when she told him, his face a mixture of wonder and concern. "As certain as I can be. I have all the signs my mother described." He pulled her close, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "A baby, our baby. Are you happy?" "I am terrified and thrilled and so many other things I cannot even name them all," he laughed shakily. "But yes, Clara. I am happy. So very happy." The pregnancy was not easy. Clara suffered from terrible sickness in the early months, barely able to keep food down. Vincent would sit with her on the bad mornings, holding her hair back and bringing her cool water, his presence steady and comforting. By summer, the sickness had passed, and Clara bloomed. Her height meant she carried the baby well, her growing stomach not as obvious as it might have been on a smaller woman. She continued her work as long as she could, taking in mending and baking pies to sell at the general store. The town's attitude toward her and Vincent had slowly softened over the months. It was hard to maintain moral outrage in the face of their obvious happiness and Vincent's reputation as a fair and honest foreman. Even Margaret Thornton had thawed slightly, going so far as to donate some baby clothes when Clara's condition became apparent. "People love to judge," Mary Jacobson said one afternoon as she and Clara sat shelling peas on the porch. "But they love a love story even more. You and Vincent are becoming one of those stories they will tell for years." "I just want to be left alone to be happy," Clara said, feeling the baby kick strongly against her ribs. "That is the secret, though. You are happy. Genuinely, obviously happy, and that is rarer than people like to admit. It makes them want to believe in happiness again." In October, as the aspens turned gold once more, Clara went into labor. It was a long, difficult birth that lasted through the night and into the next afternoon. Vincent refused to leave, despite the midwife's insistence that men should not be present for such things. "I am staying," he said firmly. "She is my wife, and I will be here." Clara was too exhausted to argue, and secretly she was grateful. His presence gave her strength when she thought she had none left. When their son finally arrived, red-faced and squalling, Vincent wept openly. "A boy," the midwife announced. "A big, healthy boy." Clara held her son against her chest, marveling at his tiny fingers and the shock of dark hair on his head. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." "What should we name him?" Vincent asked, his finger gently stroking their son's cheek. They had discussed names for months but never settled on anything definitive. Now, looking at the small miracle they had created together, Clara knew exactly what felt right. "Thomas," she said quietly. "For my first husband, who gave me the courage to come to Montana even if he could not give me the kind of love I needed. And Vincent for his middle name, for the man who taught me what real love is." Vincent's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Thomas Vincent Barlowe. It is perfect." The first year of little Thomas's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and perfect moments. Clara had never imagined she could love anything as fiercely as she loved her son, unless it was the man who would walk the floor with the baby at 2 in the morning, singing off key lullabies, so Clara could get a few hours of rest. Vincent was a devoted father, never complaining about the disruption to their lives, always ready to help with whatever was needed. He built a cradle and a high chair, baby-proofed their small house, and read to Thomas every night even though the baby was far too young to understand the words. "He likes the sound of your voice," Clara said one evening, watching Vincent read from a book of adventure stories while Thomas gazed up at him with solemn eyes. "He is going to be tall like us," Vincent observed. "Look at the length of him." Indeed, Thomas was already outgrowing his baby clothes at an alarming rate, all long limbs and healthy appetite. When Thomas was 14 months old, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news brought pure joy without the terror. She knew what to expect now, and she had Vincent by her side. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1881, an easier birth than Thomas had been. She came into the world with a full head of blonde hair and her father's gray eyes, and they named her Catherine Mary, after Vincent's mother and Mary Jacobson. Vincent held his daughter with the same wonder he had shown with Thomas, this big, rough cowboy rendered completely helpless by a 7-pound baby girl. "She is so tiny," he marveled. "She will not stay that way," Clara said, laughing softly. "If she takes after either of us, she will be tall before you know it." Life settled into a rhythm. Vincent worked hard at the ranch, saving every penny he could toward their dream of their own place. Clara managed the household and the children with capable efficiency. still finding time to help with the ranch accounts, and even teaching some of the ranch hands to read in the evenings. Samuel Jacobson's health began to fail in late 1882. He was only 60, but years of hard work had taken their toll. One evening, he called Vincent to the main house for a private conversation. Clara waited anxiously for Vincent to return, sensing that something significant was happening. When he finally came home well after dark, his expression was stunned. "What is it?" she asked immediately. "Is Samuel all right?" "He is dying," Vincent said bluntly, sinking into a chair. "The doctor gives him maybe 6 months, possibly less, and he wants to sell me the ranch." Clara felt her knees go weak. "The entire ranch, not the main house and the immediate acreage. Mary will keep that, but the rest of it, all the land and the cattle and the equipment. He wants to sell it to me at a price I can almost afford with what we have saved, with payments over time for the rest." "Vincent, that is incredible. That is everything you have wanted." "It is everything we have wanted," he corrected. "But Clara, it is a huge risk. If we fail, we lose everything. The savings, possibly this house. Can we take that chance with 2 children?" Clara thought about it carefully. She thought about Vincent's skill as a rancher, his honesty and hard work. She thought about Samuel's faith in him to make the offer in the first place. She thought about the life they could build for Thomas and Catherine and whatever other children might come. "I think we would regret it forever if we did not try," she said finally. "I trust you, Vincent. I trust us. Let us take the chance." Vincent pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Have I told you lately that you are the bravest person I know? I am not brave. I am terrified. Being brave does not mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing the thing anyway." The papers were signed in January of 1883. Samuel Jacobson died peacefully in his sleep in March, with Mary and Vincent at his bedside. The funeral was the largest Hecla had ever seen, with people coming from 3 counties to pay their respects to a man who had built something lasting. At the burial, Mary pulled Clara aside. "Take care of him," she said, meaning Vincent. "Samuel loved that ranch, but he loved Vincent like the son we never had. He wanted it to go to someone who would honor what he built." "We will," Clara promised. "I swear it." The first year of running their own ranch was the hardest thing either of them had ever done. Vincent worked from before dawn until well after dark, managing the hands, overseeing the cattle, making decisions that would determine their success or failure. Clara handled the household accounts, the cooking for the ranch hands, and caring for 2 small children, often feeling like she was being pulled in 16 directions at once. There were moments when Clara wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. Moments when the baby was crying and Thomas was into everything, and the hands needed feeding, and the accounts did not balance, and Vincent came home so exhausted he could barely speak. But there were also moments of profound joy. Thomas taking his first wobbly steps toward his father across the ranch yard. Catherine saying her first word, which was Papa, to Vincent's enormous delight and Clara's mock indignation. The first successful cattle sale that meant they could make their payment to Mary with money left over. Vincent pulling Clara into his arms at the end of a long day and saying, "We are doing it. We are actually doing it." In the spring of 1884, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. This time she cried when she told Vincent, but they were happy tears mixed with exhausted ones. "Can we handle another baby right now?" she asked. Vincent kissed her forehead. "We can handle anything together. We have proven that." Their second son arrived in late autumn, a calm, easy baby they named Samuel Jacob, after Samuel Jacobson and Vincent's father. He was the opposite of Thomas in temperament, content to lie in his cradle and observe the world with patient interest. The ranch continued to grow. Vincent's reputation for honesty and quality cattle spread, and buyers came from as far as Denver to deal with him. By 1885, they had not only met their payments to Mary, but were actually turning a profit. Mary Jacobson had become like a mother to both of them. She visited often, doting on the children and offering advice when asked. On Catherine's 4th birthday, she took Clara aside. "I want to make the ranch fully yours," she said without preamble. "The remaining payments are forgiven. Samuel would have wanted it this way. You and Vincent have honored his legacy better than I ever could have hoped." Clara tried to protest, but Mary was firm. "I have more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my days. The ranch is yours, free and clear. Build your future on it, raise your children on it, and when the time comes, pass it on to them." That night, Clara and Vincent stood on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. Thomas was chasing chickens in the yard while Catherine tried to follow on chubby legs, and baby Samuel slept peacefully in Clara's arms. "You remember the day we met?" Clara asked. "When you helped me carry my parcels." "I remember everything about that day," Vincent said. "The way the sun caught in your hair, the set of your shoulders like you were ready to fight the world, the surprise in your eyes when you did not have to look down to meet mine. I was so lonely then. So tired of being the strange, tall woman everyone pitied." Vincent turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "And now," Clara looked around at the ranch they had built together, at the children they had created, at the life they shared. "Now I am home. I am exactly where I fit." "You fit just right," Vincent said, echoing the words he had spoken years ago on a dance floor under the stars. "You always did." He kissed her then, gentle and sweet, while their children played and the Montana sunset blazed around them. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growing children. Thomas grew tall and strong, with his father's quiet competence and his mother's determination. Catherine was a whirlwind of energy, already showing signs of reaching her mother's height by the time she was 7. Samuel was thoughtful and studious, preferring books to ranch work, but learning both because that was what Barlowe children did. In 1887, Clara gave birth to another daughter, Emma Rose, and in 1889 their final child arrived, a son they named William after Clara's father. The house that had once seemed so spacious now rang with the noise and chaos of 5 children, and Clara would not have had it any other way. Vincent built additions to the house as the family grew, creating bedrooms and expanding the kitchen. The ranch prospered under his management, becoming one of the most successful operations in Montana. When Montana achieved statehood in 1889, Vincent was asked to serve on the County Board of Agriculture, a position he accepted with characteristic humility. Clara found her own ways to contribute beyond the household. She started a school for the ranch children and those from neighboring spreads, teaching reading and arithmetic at her kitchen table until Vincent built a proper schoolroom. She wrote articles for agricultural journals about ranch management and accounting, signing them C. Barlowe and amassing a small but devoted readership who had no idea the writer was a woman. The town of Hecla had grown and changed over the years. Many of those who had whispered about Clara and Vincent's hasty marriage had either moved on or conveniently forgotten their disapproval. The Barlowes were now one of the most respected families in the county, sought after for advice and assistance. Margaret Thornton, of all people, became an unlikely friend in their later years. She appeared at Clara's door one day in 1891, looking older and more humble than Clara had ever seen her. "I owe you an apology," Margaret said without preamble. "Many apologies, actually. I was cruel to you when you first came to town, and crueler still when you married Vincent so soon after your first husband's death. I was wrong, and I am sorry." Clara invited her in for tea, and over the course of that afternoon, learned that Margaret's own marriage was loveless and cold, that she had resented Clara's obvious happiness because it highlighted her own misery. "You had what I wanted," Margaret admitted. "Someone who looked at you like you mattered, like you were worth something beyond what you could provide." From that day forward, Margaret became a regular visitor, and Clara tried to offer the friendship and support the other woman had clearly been missing. When Margaret's husband died in 1893, it was Clara who sat with her through the grief, and Vincent who helped settle the estate. Thomas turned 16 in 1893 and announced his intention to attend the new agricultural college that had opened in Bozeman. Vincent was immensely proud, though Clara could see he was also sad to see his firstborn preparing to leave. "He will come back," she assured her husband one night as they lay in bed. "This ranch is in his blood. I know. But he will come back changed, educated, ready to improve on everything I have built. And that is exactly as it should be, but it makes me feel old." Clara laughed and poked him in the ribs. "You are 42, Vincent Barlowe, hardly ancient." "I feel ancient when I think about having a son old enough for college." "Well, you also have a daughter who announced today that she wants to learn to break horses like the hands do, so if you need to feel young and terrified, there is that." Vincent groaned. "Catherine will be the death of me." But he taught her to break horses anyway, because he could deny his children nothing when they showed genuine interest in the ranch. Catherine took to it naturally, fearless and skilled, and by the time she was 14, she could outride most of the hands. Samuel, true to his quiet nature, announced at 12 that he wanted to be a lawyer. "Someone needs to protect ranchers from unfair contracts and land grabs," he explained seriously. "I want to be that someone." Vincent supported this dream as readily as he had Thomas's education, even though it meant eventually losing another son to schooling in the East. Emma showed early talent for drawing and painting, covering every scrap of paper she could find with sketches of ranch life. And young William, at 5 years old, declared he would be a cowboy like Papa, which made Vincent laugh and ruffle his hair. The turn of the century brought changes to Montana and to the Barlowe Ranch. Modern innovations like barbed wire and windmills made ranch work easier in some ways, harder in others. Vincent adapted with the times, always willing to try new methods if they made sense. In 1901, Thomas returned from college with his degree and a wife, a lovely young woman named Margaret Rose who had studied teaching. Vincent welcomed his daughter-in-law warmly, and Clara was delighted to have another woman in the house who understood ranch life. Thomas and Margaret Rose took over one section of the ranch, building their own house with Vincent's help. Within 2 years, they had blessed Clara and Vincent with their first grandchild, a boy they named Vincent Thomas. And Clara discovered that being a grandmother was even more wonderful than being a mother. Catherine, at 18, shocked everyone by announcing her engagement to one of the ranch hands, a young man named Robert Chen, whose family had come from China to work on the railroad and stayed to make Montana their home. There were those in town who disapproved of the match, but Vincent and Clara supported it wholeheartedly. "He is a good man who works hard and treats our daughter with respect," Vincent said firmly when faced with criticism. "That is all that matters to us." The wedding was beautiful, blending traditions from both families. And when Catherine and Robert's first child was born with his father's dark hair and his mother's gray eyes, even the most stubborn critics had to admit the baby was beautiful. Samuel left for law school in New York in 1903, promising to write often and return when his education was complete. His letters arrived regularly, full of fascinating details about city life and legal theory, and Clara saved everyone. Emma, at 14, was offered a scholarship to study art in San Francisco. It was the hardest decision Clara and Vincent had ever made, letting their youngest daughter travel so far, but they could not deny her the opportunity. "When did we get old enough to have children scattered across the country?" Vincent asked the night after Emma left, the house feeling too quiet without her chatter. "We are not old," Clara insisted, though at 49 she certainly felt it some days. "We are experienced." William, at 11, had become Vincent's shadow, learning everything he could about running the ranch. He had his father's quiet competence and his mother's head for figures, and it was clear he would stay and help manage the family operation. In 1905, Mary Jacobson died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78. The funeral was second only to Samuel's in size and emotion. She left her remaining property to Clara and Vincent, along with a letter that made Clara weep. "You were the daughter I never had," Mary had written. "You took a chance on love when it would have been easier to stay safe and lonely. You built something beautiful with Vincent, not just a ranch but a family, a legacy. Samuel and I could not be prouder of you both. Live well, laugh often, and know that you were loved." The grief of losing Mary was softened by the joys that continued to arrive. More grandchildren came in steady succession as Thomas and Catherine built their own families. Samuel returned from law school in 1908 with his degree and a wife, establishing a practice in Helena that focused on representing ranchers and farmers. Emma sent paintings home from San Francisco, beautiful works that captured the Montana landscape from memory, and announced her engagement to a fellow artist in 1909. Through it all, Clara and Vincent remained each other's foundation. They still walked together in the evenings when weather permitted, talking about their days and their children and their dreams. Vincent's hair had gone silver, and Clara's had threads of gray running through it, but when he looked at her, his eyes still held the same warmth they had on that first day outside Miller's General Store. In 1910, the ranch celebrated its 25th year under Barlowe ownership. The family gathered for a huge celebration, children and grandchildren filling every corner of the expanded house. Thomas and Margaret Rose brought their 4 children. Catherine and Robert arrived with their 3. Samuel and his wife Hannah came from Helena with their infant daughter. Emma traveled from San Francisco with her new husband, and William, now 21, brought the young woman he was courting, a rancher's daughter from the next county named Alice. The party lasted 3 days, full of music and laughter and storytelling. On the final evening, as the sun set over the mountains in a blaze of orange and pink, Vincent pulled Clara away from the crowd. "Come with me," he said, taking her hand. He led her to the creek where they had walked on their second outing together, back when they were young and courting and everything was ahead of them. The aspens rustled in the evening breeze, and the water ran clear and cold just as it always had. "You remember this place?" Vincent asked. "Of course. This is where you told me I made Hecla different, that I made it home. You still do." Vincent turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. 27 years, Clara. 27 years since I saw you trying to carry too many parcels and decided I had to help. 27 years of building a life together, raising children, growing old. Are you having regrets?" Clara asked, though his expression told her he was not. "Not a single one. I am the luckiest man who ever lived because you said yes. Yes to my help, yes to courtship, yes to marriage, yes to this wild adventure of a life we have built." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I am the lucky one, Vincent. You saw me when I thought I was invisible. You made me feel like I fit." "You do fit," he said, pulling her close. "You fit just right, Clara Barlowe. You always have, and you always will." They stood together by the creek as the light faded, two tall figures silhouetted against the Montana sky, still fitting together perfectly after all these years. William married Alice in the spring of 1911, and they built a house on the far eastern section of the ranch. Alice proved to be a capable and enthusiastic ranch wife, and Clara was grateful to have her help and company. When Alice became pregnant that same year, Clara looked forward to another grandchild with joy. Emma and her husband moved back to Montana in 1912, unable to resist the call of home despite the opportunities in San Francisco. They built a studio on the ranch where Emma could paint and teach, and soon she had students coming from miles around to learn from her. The grandchildren grew like wildflowers, filling the ranch with their energy and noise. Clara loved watching Vincent with them, this man who had once been a lonely cowboy now surrounded by love in every direction. He taught them to ride and rope, to respect the land and the animals, to value honesty and hard work above all else. In 1915, Clara turned 60. Vincent organized a surprise party that brought tears to her eyes, gathering not just family but friends from across the state. Margaret Thornton, now elderly and frail, attended with her daughter. "You know, you were right," Margaret told Clara that evening. "About love, about taking chances. I wasted so many years being bitter about what I did not have instead of trying to find what I needed. But watching you and Vincent all these years taught me something important. It is never too late to choose happiness." At 62, Vincent still rose before dawn to work the ranch, though Thomas and William handled more of the heavy labor now. He moved a bit slower than he once had, and his hands bore the scars and calluses of a lifetime of work, but he was still the same steady, loving man Clara had married. They celebrated their 30th anniversary in 1912 with just the two of them, a quiet dinner at home while the rest of the family respected their desire for privacy. 30 years, Clara marveled. It feels like both forever and no time at all. I would do it all again, Vincent said. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, all of it exactly the same as long as it ended with us here together. Even the difficult parts, especially the difficult parts, they made us who we are. Clara raised her glass. To 30 more years, then. Vincent clenched his glass against hers. To 30 more years, and to you, Clara. My perfect fit. The war in Europe cast a shadow over their lives in 1917 when their grandson Vincent Thomas and Margaret Rose's eldest son, enlisted to fight. Clara prayed every night for his safety, and when he returned in 1919, whole in body if changed in spirit, she wept with relief. The 1920s brought prosperity to the ranch and to Montana. The Barlowe operation was now one of the largest and most respected in the state, spanning thousands of acres and employing dozens of hands. Thomas had taken over most of the day-to-day management, allowing Vincent to step back slightly, though he could never fully retire from the work he loved. Clara, at 65, finally published her writings under her own name. The collection of essays about ranch life and the challenges faced by women in agriculture was surprisingly successful, earning her invitations to speak across the state. Vincent accompanied her when he could, sitting in the audience with obvious pride as she addressed rooms full of people. "Who would have thought," Clara said after one particularly well-received talk. "The too tall widow nobody wanted is now giving lectures." "I wanted you," Vincent reminded her. "From the very beginning, I wanted you." Their children had all built good lives. Thomas managed the main ranch with his sons growing up to help him. Catherine and Robert had expanded into horse breeding with great success. Samuel's law practice thrived, and he had been appointed a circuit judge. Emma's art was gaining recognition, with her paintings hanging in galleries across the West. William and Alice were raising their family on the ranch, continuing the legacy. The grandchildren numbered 15 now, with 2 great-grandchildren already arrived and more on the way. Family gatherings required careful planning and lots of food, but Clara treasured every chaotic moment. In 1925, Hecla celebrated its 50th anniversary, and Clara and Vincent were honored as pioneering citizens who had helped build the community. Standing on the platform accepting the recognition, Clara thought about the young widow she had been, lonely and convinced she would never find her place in the world. "I found more than a place," she told the crowd. "I found a home, a family, and a love that changed everything. Montana Territory gave me a fresh start, and the people here gave me a chance even when I did not think I deserved one." Vincent, standing beside her, added his own words. "This town, this land, these people shaped who we became. But more than that, they gave me the greatest gift of my life when they brought Clara Pennington to Hecla. Everything good I have, everything we have built, starts with her." The applause was thunderous, and Clara saw tears in many eyes, including her own. As they entered their 70s, Clara and Vincent slowed down considerably. They still took their evening walks when weather permitted, though they did not go as far as they once had. They spent more time on the porch in rocking chairs Vincent had built, watching the grandchildren play and the sun set over the mountains. "Do you ever wish we had done things differently?" Clara asked one evening in 1928. "Never," Vincent said firmly. "Do you?" "Not for a moment." "Well, maybe I wish I had been brave enough to accept your help sooner, to let myself fall in love faster." "We had perfect timing," Vincent assured her. "You needed time to be ready, and I needed time to find you. Everything happened exactly when it should have." In 1930, they celebrated their 48th anniversary, surrounded by more family than Clara could sometimes keep track of. The house overflowed with children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, in-laws, and friends. Looking around at all the love and life that had come from one chance meeting, one decision to be brave, Clara felt overwhelmed with gratitude. That night, alone in their bedroom, Vincent held her close. 48 years ago, I married the bravest, strongest, most beautiful woman I had ever met. And every single day since then, I have thanked God for the miracle of you saying yes." Clara kissed him softly. 48 years ago, I married a quiet cowboy who saw me as I truly was and loved me anyway. Who made me believe I could be happy, could be loved, could build something lasting. You gave me everything, Vincent. We gave each other everything, he corrected. That is what love is, Clara. Not one person completing another, but two people choosing to build something together that is bigger than either could create alone. When did you get so wise? The moment I saw you struggling with those parcels and decided to speak to you instead of walking past. They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had for 48 years, two tall people who fit together just right. The years continued their steady march. Vincent turned 80 in 1931, and though his body had slowed considerably, his mind remained sharp, and his love for Clara never wavered. Clara, at 76, had arthritis in her hands that made fine work difficult, but she still managed the household and delighted in her growing family. Thomas was 60 now, a grandfather himself many times over. Catherine was 58, still riding horses with her grandchildren despite Vincent's protests that she should act her age. Samuel had become a respected judge, and Emma's art was exhibited in museums. William had taken over much of the ranch management, allowing Thomas to slow down as well. In the spring of 1932, Vincent suffered a heart episode that frightened everyone. The doctor ordered complete rest, and for the first time in his life, Vincent was forced to spend days in bed. Clara barely left his side, reading to him, talking with him, simply being present. "I am not ready," Vincent told her one afternoon when he had recovered enough to sit up. "I am not ready to leave you." "Then do not," Clara said firmly, though fear clutched at her heart. "Stay with me, Vincent. We have more years ahead of us." He recovered, slowly but surely, though he never regained his full strength. The doctor said his heart was tired, worn out from 81 years of hard living and hard work. Vincent accepted this with characteristic grace, spending his days on the porch Clara had specifically arranged for his comfort. They talked for hours on those long days, reminiscing about their life together, the challenges they had faced, the joys they had shared. They talked about the children and grandchildren, marveling at the family they had created. "You remember that first dance?" Vincent asked one afternoon. "At the church social. I remember everything about that night. How terrified I was that people would talk, how it felt to be in your arms and not have to bend or stoop. I told you then that you fit just right. Did you believe me?" Clara thought about it honestly. "Not completely. Not until much later, after we were married and building our life together. I think it took time for me to really believe I deserved to fit anywhere." "You deserved everything good this world has to offer," Vincent said fiercely. "And I spent every day trying to give you at least some of it. You gave me more than I ever dreamed possible. A real home, children, love, respect, partnership. You gave me myself, Vincent. The version of me I was always meant to be." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands and watching the ranch bustle with activity around them. This place they had built together, this legacy they would leave behind. Vincent passed away peacefully in his sleep on a warm July night in 1933, with Clara beside him holding his hand. He was 82 years old and had lived a good, full life. His last words to Clara, whispered in the darkness just before he slipped away, were the same words he had spoken so many times over their years together. "You fit just right." The funeral was enormous, people coming from across Montana and beyond to pay their respects to a man who had lived with honor and integrity. Clara stood tall and dry-eyed through the ceremony, saving her tears for private moments when she could grieve without an audience. She lived another 7 years without him, surrounded by family and love, but always carrying the empty space where Vincent had been. She saw more great-great-grandchildren born, attended more weddings and christenings, and continued to write occasional pieces about ranch life and love. On her 82nd birthday in 1939, Clara gathered her children around her and told them the story one more time. The story of how she had been the too-tall widow nobody wanted, how a quiet cowboy had helped her carry her parcels, how he had looked her in the eye and made her feel seen for the first time in her life. "Your father was the best man I ever knew," she told them. "He taught me that love is not about fitting into someone else's expectations. It is about finding someone who sees your true shape and says, 'Yes, that is exactly right.' He gave me that gift, and through me, he gave it to all of you. Never settle for anyone who makes you feel too much or too little of anything. Wait for someone who makes you feel just right." Clara died in her sleep in early 1940, the same way Vincent had, peaceful and pain-free. They buried her beside him on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together, under a huge Montana sky. At the funeral, Thomas read from a letter his mother had written to be opened after her death. "To my beloved children and grandchildren," it began. "I lived a long, full life blessed beyond measure. I was loved truly and completely by a good man who saw me, all of me, and never once wished I was different. I built a life that mattered, raised children I am proud of, and left behind something lasting. If I have one piece of wisdom to offer, it is this: be brave enough to take up space in the world, Be brave enough to accept help when it is offered. Be brave enough to believe you deserve love. And when you find someone who makes you feel like you fit just right, hold onto them with both hands and never let go. I found that in your father, and it made all the difference. With all my love, Clara Barlowe. The ranch continued to thrive for generations, managed by Barlows who had learned from Vincent and Clara the values of hard work, integrity, and love. The story of the too-tall widow and the quiet cowboy who said she fit just right became family legend, told and retold until it took on the weight of myth. But at its heart, it remained what it had always been, a simple truth. Two people who found each other in the vastness of Montana territory, who chose each other despite the obstacles, who built something lasting from love and determination. They had fit together just right, and from that perfect fit came a legacy that endured long after they were gone. The house Vincent built still stands on Barlow land, expanded and modernized but retaining its essential character. The rocking chairs on the porch, where Clara and Vincent spent their final years together, are preserved as family heirlooms. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind whispers through the aspens, you can almost see two tall figures standing by the creek, hands clasped, fitting together perfectly under the endless Montana sky.